The sun was bright the morning they laughed. 3 cops in a courthouse parking lot. 1 black man in a worn gray suit, cuffed, bleeding, silent. They thought he didn't belong. They called him boy. They shoved him against a squad car, right under the stone words, equal justice under law. But when the cameras started rolling and the crowd leaned in, the truth hit harder than any shove. Because the man they mocked wasn't a suspect. He was the city's chief judge. And in the next few minutes, the entire country would find out what happens when power meets the wrong man. They laughed like it was just another arrest, another morning keeping order in the courthouse lot. But what they didn't know was that this time the system had picked the wrong man to humiliate, because behind that calm face and that torn suit was someone who knew every law they were breaking, every rule they were twisting. And as those cameras kept rolling, the world was about to watch justice turn around, right there, on the same asphalt where it had just been denied. The morning sun poured over Harbor City like a verdict already decided, bright, indifferent, and final. Heat shimmered off the courthouse parking lot, carrying the smell of burnt sugar from a food truck idling at the curb. The marble facade of Brooklyn County Courthouse glared white against the blue sky, its carved motto, equal justice under law, catching the light as if daring anyone to believe it. A man in a worn gray suit walked across the asphalt, his shoes polished but scuffed, his shoulders straight but tired. His name was Gabriel Reed, and he'd walked this same stretch of pavement for 15 years. But today, the air felt different, thicker, charged with something he could not yet name. "Hey," the voice cracked the air. "You don't belong here, boy." Sergeant Bryce Kincaid stepped away from his cruiser, one hand resting on his holster, the other gesturing lazily like this was routine. His partner, Officer Tom Larkin, leaned against the hood, smirking. Reed turned, calm and unflinching. "Excuse me?" Kincaid circled him the way some men circle prey. "What's a thug like you doing out here? Casing the place?" "I work here," Reed said, evenly, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Larkin barked out a short, cruel laugh. "Sure you do, and I'm the governor. Hands where I can see them." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed, heads turned. From the steps, courthouse employees on a smoke break paused mid-conversation. A cluster of jurors craned their necks. Even the 4th graders on a courthouse field trip fell silent, clutching their teachers' hands. Officer Evan Ruiz, the youngest in the trio, shifted uneasily. He had that look, caught between instinct and training, knowing something was wrong but too green to fight it. "Probably stole that cheap suit," Larkin muttered. Reed didn't move. His stillness wasn't surrender, it was control. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Turn around, now," Kincaid ordered, voice sharp enough to slice the air. He shoved Reed toward the squad car, pressing his chest against the door. "Should have stayed in your hood." The asphalt bit through Reed's knee when he stumbled. Gravel stuck to the fabric. Someone in the crowd gasped. A teenager raised his phone. "Yo, this is messed up." Kincaid's laugh was short and ugly. "Another day, another wannabe hero." Through the hum of voices, a door burst open behind them. Helen Whitaker, the courthouse registrar, came running. "Officers, stop right now." Kincaid didn't even look back. "Step away, ma'am. Police matter." Helen's breath caught when she recognized the man pinned against the squad car. "You don't know who you're—" "I said step back," Kincaid barked, "or you're next." The words hit like a slap. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then slowly, every phone in the crowd lifted higher. Screens glowed. The modern-day witnesses began to film. Reed's voice, calm as a clock ticking in a silent room, broke the tension. "I have the right to remain silent," he said, "and I choose to exercise that right." Larkin chuckled, glancing at the crowd. "He's done this before. Look at him. Professional victim." The rookie, Ruiz, took a step back, unease spreading across his face. "Sarge, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Ruiz." The handcuffs clamped down. Reed winced as the metal dug into his wrists. He looked up, not at the officers, but at the security camera above the door, its red light blinking like an unblinking eye. And then he smiled, just barely. "Transport him," Kincaid said. "On what charge?" Ruiz asked. Kincaid's grin widened. "Existing while suspicious." The phrase drew nervous laughter from a few onlookers. Others lowered their heads, ashamed. The courthouse doors opened again. This time, Judge Naomi Sinclair stepped out, her black robe catching the light. "Officers, what on earth is happening?" "Ma'am, stay back," Kincaid repeated. "We've got this under control." She froze. Her gaze swept the scene. The kneeling man, the blood on the concrete, the laughter, and then her face went pale. "Dear God, do you know who that is?" Kincaid snorted. "Yeah, another trespasser. That's Chief Judge Gabriel Reed." Her words hit like a thunderclap. For a full second, the world stopped. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Larkin blinked. What did she just say? The radios crackled all at once. A dispatcher's voice cut through. "Unit 12, confirm you are not arresting Chief Judge Reed of Brooklyn County Court." Ruiz's hand moved automatically toward his keys. Kincaid's didn't. He stiffened, jaw clenching, the reality crawling over his face but refusing to settle. "Don't touch those cuffs," Kincaid hissed. "Not until I see proof." Reed turned his head slightly. His voice was low, calm, but it carried through the crowd. "Sergeant Kincaid, badge number 2847, 3 years on the force, 17 excessive force complaints, all dismissed by your friend at Internal Affairs." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Kincaid's eyes darted. "How the hell do you know that?" Reed's gaze found Larkin next. "Officer Larkin, badge 0391, 6 years, gambling problem, covered by the Union." The silence was a drumbeat now. Footsteps thundered behind the line of cruisers. Mayor Olivia Grant, flanked by Police Chief Daniel Mercer, arrived mid-chaos. "What in God's name is going on here?" "Mayor," Helen stammered, "they arrested—" But Reed's calm voice cut through. "Me," he said, "your chief judge." The mayor's eyes locked on the blood on his knees. "Chief Mercer, get those cuffs off him, now." Mercer's face went white. "Yes, ma'am." He reached for Kincaid's belt, unhooked the key, and freed the locks. The metal fell away, clattering against the pavement. Reed flexed his wrists. Red grooves marked his skin, raw and deliberate. He didn't rub them. He simply looked up at the cameras, then at the crowd. "We will address the crimes committed here," he said evenly. "Assault, false imprisonment, violation of civil rights under color of law." Kincaid took a step back, mouth open but empty of words. The crowd began to murmur, first a trickle, then a tide. "Chief Judge," someone whispered. Helen nodded, tears streaming down her face. 15 years, every morning. Reed turned toward Ruiz, who was trembling now, guilt written all over his young face. The rookie took a knee, not in protest, but in apology. "Sir, I failed my oath." Reed met his eyes, then learned from it. Phones tilted forward like sunflowers toward light. "Justice needs witnesses," Reed said softly. The phrase spread through the crowd like a spark catching dry grass. Witnesses, justice, witnesses. Kincaid's voice cracked through the noise, desperate. "You think this changes anything? You think this city's gonna forget?" Reed looked at him. No anger, no triumph, just truth. "No, Sergeant, they're going to remember." And for the first time that morning, Kincaid couldn't find anything to say. The mayor turned to the press gathering at the edge of the lot. "No statements yet," she warned, but her voice trembled. This is a crime scene now. As paramedics arrived to check Reed's wrists, the courthouse behind him loomed silent, its windows reflecting dozens of raised phones and the flicker of blue and red lights. History wasn't written inside that building anymore. It was being filmed, right here on the asphalt. The laughter had stopped, but the story had just begun. The paramedic's gauze circled his wrists like small, unasked-for halos. Reed thanked her, voice steady, then waved off the offer of a stretcher. "I'm fine," though his knees burned each time the breeze touched torn fabric. The boom of a news van's side door clattered across the lot, reporters jockeying along the tape. Somewhere behind the wall of faces and phones, a fourth grader asked his teacher in a whisper if judges bleed. The teacher didn't answer. "Chief Judge?" a patrol sergeant ventured, unsure if he should salute, apologize, or vanish. Reed didn't answer him either. He lifted his eyes to the courthouse doors and let the building anchor him. He had walked through those doors more mornings than most people managed prayers. If there was a place he knew how to breathe, it was there. He turned toward the steps. The crowd parted with an instinct older than any policy. Some pressed hands to their hearts. A few reached out without touching, as though proximity could lend courage back to the city. Helen fell into step beside him, cheeks still wet. "Gabe," she said, voice hushed, as if something sacred had entered the air. "They didn't know. I kept telling myself they didn't know." "They knew enough," Reed said, not unkindly. He let the pain in his knees be what it was. Present, unspectacular, a reminder that bodies keep the score even when institutions refuse to. "You okay?" She exhaled a laugh that wasn't a laugh. "I'm 61 and just sprinted across a parking lot like a rookie bailiff. I'll live." Her gaze flicked to the newsline. "They're going to make a meal out of this. Level moderate." "We'll give them the right ingredients," he said. "Facts, pattern, names." The foyer swallowed the noise the second they crossed the threshold. The courthouse air carried that familiar cocktail, paper, marble dust, coffee brewed hard enough to strip paint. A pair of young public defenders stood frozen at the magnetometer, eyes round, forgotten IDs midair. Brad Kinley, the contract guard who had lingered over Reed's license that morning, straightened as if lightning had licked his spine. His right hand hovered near his can of spray, then fell, then hovered again. He looked like a man who'd just discovered gravity wasn't optional. "Morning, Mr. Kinley," Reed said, passing through the archway. The machine beeped. It always beeped. He stopped, put his arms out to the side, and let the wand dance. You could tell a city by how its security wands moved, some respectful, some bored, some eager for the theater of it. Kinley's hand trembled. I mean, earlier I was told that I looked suspicious," Reed finished softly. "You're not the first to think so." He took his wallet out and set it on the counter with more ceremony than he'd offered to any award in his life. "I've worked here 15 years, Mr. Kinley." Kinley swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor." "Gabe," Helen warned under her breath, a hand on his sleeve, like a friend at the edge of a cliff. But Reed's gaze was already turning inward, deeper into the corridors he could navigate blind. Hallway lights pooled like quiet lakes. The pendulum clock near probate ticked a beat you could pace your heart to. On better days, he had teased Helen that the building itself kept him honest. The long walk from elevator to chambers like a confessional, each footstep an RSVP back to duty. He remembered the first time he'd crossed this floor as a prosecutor, a kid from a row house with a permanent press suit and the kind of shoes that blistered where ambition outpaced money. He'd slipped into his car after working late, and someone had pounded the hood with the heel of a hand, yelling for his registration. The officer never apologized after realizing who he was. The apology went to the car, a paternal pat to the hood, as if it were the one offended. Reed remembered thinking then that apologies find steel more easily than they find flesh. "Gabe, the voice called from the bank of elevators. Tessa Nguyen emerged with a messenger bag slung crossbody and a look that said she'd slept too little and seen too much. "I've got the pull." He raised an eyebrow. She was a reporter, not family, but in some ways she had shown up like family shows up, early, persistent, carrying proof. "How clean?" he asked. "Clean enough to make liars turn off their phones." She handed over a thumb drive in a small plastic case. 17 months of stops in the 3 blocks around here, all men of color unless you count the one Latino cop in plain clothes who got stopped and Lucky charmed his way out of it by showing his badge. The audio you quoted? I cross-referenced it. Kincaid was on those shifts, logged in, dash cam mysteriously malfunctioned 9 of those 17 times. We resurrected the audio from cloud pings. He never learned you can erase a file but not metadata. "Who's we?" Reed asked. Tessa tilted her head toward the far end of the hall. A man with a laptop open on a rolling case nodded back. Jamal Ortiz, civil rights attorney, sleeves rolled too, his forearms like he'd poured concrete with them that morning. "We, as in the coalition you keep telling to bring receipts," she said. "We brought receipts." He wanted to smile and couldn't quite find the muscles for it. "You realize they'll call this a witch hunt?" Tessa shrugged. "Then we'll be the kind that dunk the witch to see if she floats. Evidence has this weird habit of not drowning." He tucked the drive into his inside pocket the way some men tuck a picture of their children. "Thank you." "Do not thank me," she said. "Use it." He passed the criminal wing, past the portrait of a judge who had once told him in a narrow elevator where sound had nowhere else to go that if he wanted to get ahead, he should shave the edge off that voice. Reed had asked which edge. The judge had chuckled like toffee sticking in teeth. He had meant the part of Reed that belonged to another neighborhood, another history, anything that spoke in the wrong accent for marble. Judge Naomi Sinclair intercepted him outside courtroom 3, robe open over a navy dress. Up close, anger sharpened her. "I should have busted through that tape, thrown my body between you and those boys." "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," Reed said, because he believed it. "You named me. Sometimes that's what stops bullets, and sometimes it isn't. Today it was enough." "You sound like you've rehearsed that line." "I have, since 1992. Her jaw worked as if grinding down a curse. Level moderate. "What's the plan?" "Make a record," he said. "Then make a remedy." She glanced down at his knees, at the damp, rust-colored blooms spreading in threads. "You need a doctor." "I need the truth under lights," he said, and then because the truth can have a bedside manner, he added, "I'll let medical clean me up when we're done." They moved in a small convoy now, Helen, Naomi, Tessa, shadowing with a reporter's patience that had learned to respect the difference between being first and being right. Jamal peeled off to a side office to corral a paralegal team assembling chain of custody affidavits, as if they were paper sandbags against a flood. At the end of the corridor, District Attorney Lauren Park stood with her arms folded tight across her ribs and the flat stare of a surgeon sizing the cut she needed to make. "Your Honor," she said, then corrected herself. "Gabriel." She held up a narrow notebook. "I've already drafted a skeleton for charges: assault, battery, false imprisonment, civil rights violation under 18 U.S.C. 242. We'll add enhancement for color of law abuse. I want your statement as a citizen, not as a judge." "You'll have it," he said. "Good. Also, your knees are bleeding on my hallway." He almost smiled. "Consider it an exhibit." "Cute. Try not to drip on my paperwork." She flicked her gaze toward the clerks. "And someone get me every complaint ever filed on Kincaid and Larkin. Every single one. The ones Internal Affairs filed properly, and the ones they filed in their heads and never on paper." A bailiff rounded the corner, breathless. "Chief Mercer is in your chambers, Judge." He says he wants to apologize. Does he? Reed said, and started walking. He found Daniel Mercer standing the way career cops stand when the ground moves, heels dug in, hand on a belt that isn't there. Mercer had taken off his uniform jacket and rolled his sleeves. It was supposed to signal humility. Reed thought it made the man look undressed. "Gabe," Mercer began. "I am..." "Sorry," Reed finished. "I know, for the image. For the headlines. For the calls you're getting." "For you," Mercer said, and to his credit, he looked like he might even mean it. "That's not enough," Reed said. "Not anymore." Mercer nodded once, like a man entering a room he'd avoided. "You're going to press charges." "Yes. And you're going to ask for additional measures." "I'm not asking," Reed said, and the judge in his voice left no oxygen for misunderstanding. "We're installing body cams that cannot be turned off without automatic tamper alerts to Internal Affairs and the Civilian Board. We're giving that board binding discipline authority. We're instituting a mandatory report rule strong enough to crack your blue wall. We're selling one armored toy to fund it. And I want 70 hours of training for every badge, 40 on implicit bias, 20 on de-escalation, 10 on black letter law they claim to enforce." Mercer sank into a chair like the air had gone heavy. 70 hours is a lot. "Not as much as a funeral," Reed said. "Witch hunt," Mercer muttered, and made a face as if hearing his own echo. "That's what they're going to call it." "Witches don't carry dash cams," Reed said. "Your men do." Mercer pinched the bridge of his nose. "Donnelly's going to fight." "Rick Donnelly can fight all he wants," Reed said, "but he can fight at a table where the mayor and the DA sit, and he can fight with all of Harbor City watching." As if summoned by name, Mercer's phone buzzed. "Donnelly," the screen announced. The chief silenced it, then put both hands flat on Reed's desk. "I want to be clear. I've tried to move this place every time I hit the same wall." "Then stop being the wall," Reed said. "Be the door." Mercer looked at him for a long time, as if measuring lumber in his head. "You're going to bring the feds if we don't go along." Reed gestured to a manila envelope on the credenza. "Draft letter to the U.S. Attorney. I won't bluff." Mercer nodded again, slower. "All right," he said. "I'll stand next to the mayor. I'll say we're in. You do one thing for me." "What's that?" "Don't make me a villain when you go outside," Mercer said. "If I flip my guys to support this, I can't look like I lost a fight. I have to look like I'm leading." Reed considered it. Vanity was a tool like any other, dangerous, useful, needing supervision. "Lead then," he said, "and show up when it's hard." When Mercer left, Reed closed the chamber door and let his forehead rest against the wood. The shape of this day had been bending toward him for years. He had told himself patience was strategy, not surrender. But there are mornings when strategy looks a lot like choking on your own dignity. He let himself stand there through 3 slow breaths, one for his mother's voice telling him to keep a cool head, one for his daughter's 6-year-old question from a lifetime ago about why his badge didn't protect him, one for the boy outside who asked if judges bleed. A soft knock, and Helen slid in like a whisper. "They're ready for you in the conference room." "Tell them to start the feed," he said. "You really want it live?" Justice hates back rooms. They took the long way so he could pass the carved motto one more time. Some days you have to stare down a promise until it blinks. In the elevator, Helen squeezed his hand once, the way people do when words are either too large or too small for the space between bodies. He squeezed back. The elevator chimed. The conference room's air was 10 degrees colder than the hall. City government likes its rooms chilled, maybe to keep tempers from melting the furniture. Mayor Olivia Grant already sat at the long table, posture straight, palms on a folder stamped with the city seal. On her left, DA Lauren Park stacked a slim tower of legal pads as if she planned to build a gallows with them. Rick Donnelly, the union president, occupied the opposite end like an occupying force, neck flushed and angry pink. The three civilian oversight members looked like citizens always look when they're finally invited inside, a mix of gratitude, fury, and the taut fear of being used as decoration. "We're streaming," Tessa said from behind a tripod in the corner, eye to the viewfinder. Jamal sat beside her, laptop open to a dashboard that pulsed with red dots. Incidents mapped like a rash across the blocks surrounding the courthouse. "Good," Reed said. He stood instead of taking the end chair. The light found his wrists again, a dull radiance under clean gauze. "Thank you for coming on short notice." Donnelly snorted. "You called the Rolling Heads meeting. We showed." "You came for something else," Reed said, voice even. "You came to tell me to take a breath, to be reasonable, to handle this quietly." Donnelly opened his hands, palms out. "No, I came to ask you to stop turning a bad morning into a crusade." His eyes flicked to the camera, then back. "We all regret what happened. Let's not burn the city down over it." "Burning happens when truth is kept in the dark," Reed said. "Today we're going to leave the lights on." He gestured to the screen on the far wall. Jamal tapped a key and the timeline unspooled. Faces, dates, body positions familiar to anyone who has ever watched a stop go wrong. The high hands, the slowed speech, the thousand small humiliations that train a person how to survive. Larkin's laugh repeated over one clip, then another, until it didn't sound like a laugh anymore so much as a reflex. 17 months, Reed narrated, targeting within a 3-block radius. Malfunctions when... The subject is black or brown. He turned to Donnelly. "You've seen some of this?" "I've seen context," Donnelly said, already winding up. "Split-second decisions. Threats you don't see on camera. Armchair quarterbacks playing judge from their couches." He caught himself, realizing the word he'd chosen, and smirked, as if that absolved it. "Armchairs aren't the problem," D.A. Park said. "The problem is officers who think the law is a costume for other people." Donnelly arched an eyebrow. "You've never had to make a call in the heat." "I make them under oath every single day," she said. "Difference is, I don't get to cuff the people who disagree with me." "Enough," Mayor Grant said, not loud but with the tone that makes men not test the decibel level. She turned to Reed. "Your recommendations?" He recited them as if reading from a ledger, not because he needed notes, but because he wanted the rhythm to be working man plain. The cams, the board, the training hours, the tamper alerts that ping both internal affairs and the civilian board in real time, the sale of an armored vehicle to pay for the first year, the mandatory reporting rule with real teeth. He added one more, improvising not so much as remembering an overdue bill. "And we institute randomized integrity tests, ride-alongs by trained auditors who can pull footage and file findings directly to the board." Donnelly sputtered. "Stings? You want to sting officers while they work?" "I want to find out if the story we tell ourselves about who we are is true," Reed said. Mercer cleared his throat. "Mayor, I'm prepared to stand by this package. It's time." Donnelly's head snapped toward him. "You're out of your mind." "No," Mercer said, and the room shifted slightly, as if furniture had agreed to rearrange itself. "I'm out of patience." Mayor Grant nodded once. "Motion to adopt the Reed reforms effective immediately." "Second," D.A. Park said, pen at the ready like a blade. Hands went up. 3 civilian members, the mayor, the D.A., Mercer, with a breath that sounded a little like surrender and a little like relief. Donnelly stared as if the table had betrayed him personally. "Motion carries," Grant said. "Chief Mercer, begin Phase 1 within 72 hours. D.A. Park, open a case file. Mr. Donnelly, I expect your cooperation." "My what?" Donnelly said flat. "Your cooperation," she repeated, cool as shade. "Try it on, it might fit." He pushed away from the table hard enough to sneeze the chair legs. On his way out, he leaned toward Kincaid in the hall. Tessa's camera caught it through the glass. "Keep your mouth shut," he hissed. "No text, no email. We ride this out." You could practically hear the caption forming under the frame, the wall whispering to its bricks. When the room emptied, Reed stayed a moment, palms spread on the tabletop, eyes on the map of dots that still glowed like fever. He thought of his mother's thermos, her hands packing his lunch when he was a baby lawyer, telling him to use his words like a key, not a knife. He thought of the 6-year-old version of his daughter asking him in the driveway why men with badges didn't listen when he said who he was. He thought of the kid outside asking if judges bleed and about how lousy an answer sometimes would be. Helen stepped back in with fresh coffee, the kind she brewed in defiance of the swill downstairs. He took a sip and had to close his eyes. "You always make it this strong?" he asked. "It's either this or I start smoking again," she said. "Don't," he said. We need you." "Who's we?" she teased, softer now. "Everyone who thinks marble should have a memory," he said, and set the cup down because the tremor in his hands was starting to embarrass him. It wasn't fear, it was relief, crashing late to the party. Outside, the city throbbed with a new pulse. Word had already outrun cameras, sprinting block to block like gossip on a Sunday stoop. At the foot of the steps, the fourth graders gathered around a tour guide who had abandoned the script. "This is where laws are kept," he said, tapping the brochure's photo of a courtroom. Then he swallowed and added, "and sometimes where they're born." Reed returned to the lobby once more before the afternoon press conference, drawn like iron to the magnet of a ritual he refused to surrender. He stood at the magnetometer, removed his watch, wallet, keys, like always, and passed through the arch. It beeped, like always. Kinley wanded him, gentler this time, careful the way people are when they've been shown a mirror. The wand ticked over Reed's belt buckle, then quieted. "Thank you, Mr. Kinley," Reed said. "Your Honor," Kinley said, voice low. "This morning, You follow policy," Reed said. "Tomorrow will help you follow better policy." Kinley nodded once. That was all. Sometimes repentance looks like shutting up and doing your job right. As Reed turned toward the stairs, Officer Evan Ruiz stood waiting a respectful distance away, civilian jacket thrown over his uniform shirt as if he'd tried halfway to stop being a cop and then remembered he had to do it properly. The kid looked wrecked in the way that means salvageable. "Sir," Ruiz said, "I know you told me resigning isn't redemption. I called internal affairs. I'm giving a statement, and I've already reached out to the law school. Their dean says I can sit in on a class next week." "You don't have to become a lawyer to be decent," Reed said. "I know," Ruiz answered, and cracked a smile that gave away how young he was. "But maybe I owe decency some homework." Reed grunted what might have been approval, then clapped him once on the shoulder. "Bring what you know," he said, "and brace for unlearning." They stood in companionable silence for a beat. The clock near probate ticked. The marble threw their reflections back at them, distorted at the edges the way truth often is, until you get close enough. "Press is waiting," Naomi said from the landing, one hand on the rail. Her eyes flicked to his knees, then back to his face. "Think you got one more round in you?" "I've been training for it since a parking lot in '92, he said. "And since this morning," she said gently. "And since this morning," he agreed. He took the stairs, counting them without counting them, the muscle memory of 15 years lending him cadence. Outside, the day had shifted a shade cooler, as if the sky had remembered its job. The parking lot still bore the chalk outline of where he'd been forced to kneel. Not a real outline, not one any officer had drawn, just the memory mapped by hundreds of eyes. The cameras pivoted toward him like flowers tracking sun. "My name is Gabriel Reed," he said into the microphones. "I serve this city. Today this city served me back." He looked from lens to lens, making sure each felt seen. But service isn't a good deed, it's a duty. If we mean to be more than marble and mottos, we have to do the work. We've just begun. He didn't announce all the details. Park would, the mayor would, Mercer would take a bite he could chew and swallow. What he offered was the part cameras rarely catch, an invitation turned into an order. Stand witness, he said. Stay loud. Demand receipts and reforms and the kind of justice that doesn't need a title to recognize a human being. The crowd didn't cheer so much as exhale. You could feel something unclench. He stepped back from the podium, ignored the shouted questions lobbed like coins into a fountain, and let the mayor move forward to do the arithmetic out loud. Timelines, phases, oversight schedules, the tamper alert spec Tessa would run as a graphic by evening. Reed's phone buzzed twice. Unknown number, then another. He slid it back into his pocket unread. The work didn't live in calls, not today. It lived in eyes. He found Helen again without looking for her. She had a way of being exactly where his day needed a hinge. You ready? She asked, which was ridiculous because being ready had never been a condition of doing what had to be done. Almost, he said. One more thing. He turned his face toward the security dome above the door, the tiny unblinking pupil that had recorded a morning the city would talk about for years. He bowed to it the way men bow to altars, not because they worship the camera, but because they respect what it has made undeniable. The red light winked once, a metronome in the corner of Justice's eye. Then he pivoted, leather soles whispering on the stone, and headed back down the steps toward the spot where the cuffs had kissed and the laughter had died. The mayor's voice rolled behind him, crisp and administrative. The city listened. Reed walked through their listening like a man stepping into the center of a circle he had drawn a long time ago and finally finished. By the time he reached the tape line, the wind had turned. You could smell salt again and the faint sweetness of something caramelizing on the food truck grill. He looked at the scuffed patch of asphalt where his knees had found grit and blood, then at the faces beyond it, then at the microphones that had grown like weeds on their spindly stands. Make the record, he told Park, low enough that only she heard. We're rolling, she said, and lifted her pen. He squared his shoulders. Name? Level moderate. Gabriel Reed. Occupation? He let himself smile, just a little. Chief Administrative Judge, Brooklyn County Courthouse. Tell me what happened, she said. He did. He told her with the precision judges save for instructions and eulogies. He told her about the holster hand, about the push and the laugh, about the crunch of knee to asphalt and the slice of a word like boy. He told her about the silence that wasn't surrender and the smile that wasn't bravado and the way a city sounds when it remembers itself. He did not embellish. He did not forgive prematurely. He laid it down like lumber, board by board, until a frame stood where earlier there had only been glare. By the time he finished, the sun had shifted enough to throw the building's shadow over the parking lot where the worst of the morning had lived. People stepped into that shade like relief. Park capped her pen. Tessa lowered her camera. Somewhere a kid started to laugh the laugh of ordinary afternoons, the kind that mean the world is holding. Reed's phone buzzed again. He let it. Okay, he said, and it felt like a beginning disguised as a middle. Let's go outside and hold court. He did not mean a courtroom, not yet. He meant the patch of asphalt with the crowd already ringed and the microphones already hungry and the officers already learning what it sounds like when power has to listen. He meant the thing Naomi had asked him in the hall, what's the plan? And his answer, unspoken then, was spoken now by the way he moved through air that no longer tasted like someone else's decision. And as the first question from the first camera rose like a gavel about to fall, the city leaned in, the way a jury leans when it knows the verdict. It is about to hear will belong to it just as much as to the man speaking. The first question came from a woman with a microphone wrapped in blue foam, but Reed didn't answer it. He didn't answer the second or the third either. He let the questions splash against him and fade, kept his gaze steady on the loose semicircle of faces and phones and uniforms. It wasn't time for answers yet. It was time to build the record. "Step back 2 feet," he said, voice carrying without shouting. "Give us space." He pointed with an open hand to a patch of asphalt not 20 feet from the squad car where his knees had met gravel. The crowd shifted as one organism, murmur, shuffle, the metallic clink of someone bumping a barricade. A line of sunlight fell across Reed's shoes and stayed there, as if the day had decided to underline him. D.A. Lauren Park took her place at his side with a legal pad and a pen that clicked like a metronome. Jamal Ortiz came to stand just behind them, laptop under one arm, eyes sweeping the crowd like a lifeguard scanning a deep end. Tessa framed them in her lens and looked once at Reed as if to say, "Are you sure?" He nodded. It wasn't consent to exposure, it was insistence on it. "Name for the record," Park said. "Gabriel Reed." Occupation: Chief Administrative Judge, Brooklyn County Courthouse. Time and place: today, this lot, the steps of the building where I work, and the city I serve. Kincaid's scoff barely rose above a throat clear. "You putting on a show?" Reed didn't take the bait. He looked to Ruiz. "Officer." Ruiz straightened, a reflex he hadn't had time to unlearn. "Yes, sir." "I'll need your name, badge number, and what you witnessed. Speak plain." The kid swallowed once. "Officer Evan Ruiz, badge 651. I witnessed Sergeant Kincaid and Officer Larkin initiate a detainment without stating probable cause. I heard Sergeant Kincaid refer to the subject," he stopped, winced, "to Chief Judge Reed as boy and call him a trespasser. I saw Chief Judge Reed comply with commands, keep his hands visible, and still get forced to the ground." "Did you hear threats?" Ruiz's eyes cut to Kincaid, then back. "I heard 'keep your mouth shut' to me earlier. I heard 'we can add resisting,' not because there was resisting, because he wanted to make it stick." "Thank you," Reed said. "That's enough for now." Ruiz looked like a man stepping off a ledge and discovering stairs. "Sergeant Kincaid," Park said, pen poised, "please step forward." Kincaid smirked, rooted to his spot. "I'm not doing an interview." "This is not an interview," Park said. "This is a charging moment." A ripple went through the crowd, small, electric. Larkin's grin tightened and thinned. Reed reached into his jacket, not fast, never fast around men who wore fear like an accessory. He pulled out his phone and unlocked it with a touch. On the screen, the thumbnail grid glimmered, blocks of time stamped with dates and car numbers. Tessa's lens caught the reflection and sent it across 1,000 live feeds. He swiped once, twice, then held it up so the cluster of cameras could see too. "Sergeant Kincaid," Reed said, "on the evening of last Tuesday, your dash cam failed to upload to the city server. Internal Affairs closed the review for insufficient evidence." But cloud pings aren't obedient. The audio bled into the cache. He tapped play. The phone's speaker was tinny, but the voice was unmistakable. "Another black boy playing dress-up. Let's see how tough he is without his fancy clothes." The sound cut the way a glass breaks, neat, then hairline cracks racing out. Someone in the crowd swore under their breath. Someone else said, "That's his voice." Larkin shifted against the cruiser and found nowhere to go. Kincaid stared at the phone as if staring hard enough could jam time. "Out of context," Kincaid said, too quick. "Let's give it context," Reed said. He swiped again. A map bloomed in Jamal's hands and, as if the devices were conspiring, mirrored itself on Tessa's tablet, a 3-block radius flecked with red dots. 17 months, Reed said. "Stops clustered around this building like barnacles, mostly black men, mostly released without charges, mostly when your dash cams failed." A voice from the back, a woman in scrubs with a hospital badge, called out, "Say his badge number again." Park did. The crowd repeated it softly, a litany, chill and prayerful. Mayor Grant stepped close enough for her shoulder to almost touch Reed's. "Chief Mercer," she said, not looking away from the line of officers, "your men will maintain order and keep quiet. The city will not obstruct this record." Mercer nodded once, jaw hard. You could see the calculation behind his eyes, what he could salvage, what he would finally allow to break. A teenager edged forward, phone held eye level. "Sir, what do you want us to do?" "Stand witness," Reed said. "Don't argue with strangers on the internet. Don't chase a fight. Keep the footage intact. Upload copies to an independent archive. If any of you captured audio that differs from what I'll play, send it." He looked past the boy to the cluster of fourth graders. "And for the kids, this is not a field trip you were meant to take. But you're here, and I'm glad. You're seeing what the grown-ups do when the rules are tested." The smallest kid, a girl with pink beads, lifted her hand without thinking. "Are you mad?" Reed's mouth softened. "I'm patient," he said, "and tired, and ready." He turned the phone sideways and cued the second clip. Larkin laughing, low, chewel, as if humiliation were a condiment he put on everything. The words weren't as clean, wind in the mic, a truck rumbling past, but the gist traveled. Ad resisting, make it stick. The rookie's voice again, uncertain. Kincaid's bark. The audio clicked off. Reed lowered the phone. "Officer Larkin," Park said, level as a spirit level, "you will surrender your service weapon to Chief Mercer at the conclusion of this recording. You and Sergeant Kincaid are not to delete, alter, or transport any digital files or devices, body cams, dash cams, phones, laptops. We will seek an emergency preservation order. Any tampering will be charged separately." Larkin's grin finally died the way a streetlight goes. Flicker, then dark. Donnelly pushed through the police line on a current of righteous anger. "This is a circus. We have procedures. My officers have rights." "Your officers have a pattern," Jamal said, without raising his voice, angling his laptop so Donnelly could see the heat map, "and a habit of turning off the camera when the subject is black." "Random," Donnelly said. "Nothing random about a habit," Jamal said. Donnelly searched for a foothold and found none. "You don't get to make policy on a sidewalk," he said to Reed, unsteady. Reed met him with stillness, the opposite of fear. "Policy was made inside for a long time," he said. "Look where it got us." "Sergeant Kincaid," Park said again, "for the record, state the specific, articulable suspicion that justified your stop." Kincaid's eyes flicked left, right, script swallowed. He looked wrong for the area. "What does that mean?" Park asked. "His clothes, his attitude." "Wearing a suit," Park said, pen moving, "and walking toward the courthouse where he works." "People wear suits to court all the time," Kincaid snapped. "Exactly," Park said, "and yet you suspected a felony because a black man in a suit looked wrong to you next to a building full of people in suits." "This is your whole case?" Kincaid said, voice ragged. "Gotchas and sound bites?" "My case," Park said, her voice sharpening for the first time, "is that you placed a man on his knees with his hands visible, added charges you hadn't earned, laughed about making them stick, and called him boy in front of children you were supposed to be protecting." Kincaid's jaw bunched. "I called him that because—" "Don't," Reed said. Not a shout, not a plea. A gate closing. The little girl with beads squeezed her teacher's fingers. The teacher squeezed back. Judge Naomi Sinclair stepped forward, not in robe now, but still wearing the authority of it. "For the record," she said, "I identified Chief Judge Reed to the officers and was instructed to step back and that the situation was under control. It was not." She turned to the crowd. "Sometimes control is the word people use to keep you from looking close." A reporter called, "Chief Judge, what do you say to people who think this is about revenge?" Reed didn't look at her. He looked at the teenager with the phone, at the woman in scrubs, at a man in a city sanitation uniform who had stopped mid-shift to stand with his arms folded like a doorframe. "This is about receipts," he said. "Revenge is a feeling. Receipts are a fact." A chant sparked, small, unplanned, "Witness, witness," and then it grew legs, not loud so much as deep, a baseline under the afternoon, "Stand witness, speak truth, share hope." Mercer stepped close enough for only Reed to hear. "You've got your footage, your charges. I'll get you your preservation order, but if this goes sideways, it already went sideways," Reed said. "We're putting it back upright." "The protective order is drafted," Jamal said. "We can file in an hour, 2, if the clerk's office pretends it lost power." Helen appeared at the periphery like a sunrise, setting a stamped form into Park's hand. "Clocked it in 5 minutes ago," she said. "I took the stairs." Reed checked a text. "Saw you on my feed. Breathing. You okay?" He typed one word, "Working," then raised his hands slightly to quiet the crowd. "You're going to hear a lot of words in the next few days. Witch hunt, overreaction, isolated incident. You're going to hear that we are destroying careers over a misunderstanding." His gaze returned to Kincaid and Larkin. "Here's what I'm going to say back every time. We are protecting lives over a pattern." He looked at Ruiz. "Officer, you had a choice today. You made the right one. Keep making it." Ruiz nodded, eyes bright with a gratitude that embarrassed him. "Sergeant Kincaid," Park said, "you are hereby notified you are the subject of a criminal investigation. You will not speak to potential witnesses except through counsel. You will not approach the judge. You will surrender your service weapon." "I'll take it," Mercer said, final as a lock turning. Kincaid hesitated, paws stretched, then unholstered and placed the gun into Mercer's palm. The snap of leather made 3 people flinch. Larkin swallowed hard, followed suit. The chant softened into silence. The air took on that courtroom quality again, felt rather than heard. Tessa lifted her voice. "Upload your footage to the archive link in the ticker. Don't edit. Don't add commentary. Let the video speak. Make copies. Send one to the Ledger, one to the DA, one to the Coalition. Don't trust a single basket." Jamal asked, "Anything else, Judge?" Reed nodded once. He turned back to the crowd. "If any of you had a moment today when you thought, 'This isn't my business,' remember how fast it became your business just by standing in the same sun. The law isn't a wall you hide behind. It's a road we all have to share without shoving each other off it." He breathed. The gauze at his wrists itched where sweat had begun to dry. He pressed 2 fingers lightly to the edge of the wrap, not rubbing, just acknowledging. He hurt, and he was choosing to stand anyway. Kincaid found his voice, a last-ditch rasp. "You think the city's going to thank you for this? For hanging cops out to dry? For making us hesitate the next time there's a real threat?" Reed faced him fully for the first time. "If hesitation means you learn to see a person before a target, then yes," he said. "I hope you hesitate." Park capped her pen. "We're done here?" she said. "For now." People didn't clap. They exhaled, relief and grief in equal parts. The 4th graders whispered. The teenager checked his upload bar. The woman in scrubs took a photo, not of Reed, but of the space where his knees had been, a rectangle of asphalt newly famous. Mayor Grant returned to the microphones, schedules, drafts, deadlines. Mercer strung yellow tape along a tighter perimeter. Jamal answered quiet questions in a voice pitched to trust. Tessa took 3 stills, then set her camera down and just looked at the people. The obvious human part. Reed caught Naomi's eye. She tilted her chin toward the doors. "Come on." He touched Park's elbow. "I'll give you a statement in writing by 4, he said. "I'll expect it by 3, she said, and he almost laughed. He took 1 step, then another. The cameras tracked him, but he didn't mind. The cameras had become part of the architecture. He bent toward the little girl with the beads. For the record, he said, judges do bleed. She considered that, then nodded. Okay, but you stopped it. Not yet, he said. We slowed it down. The courthouse doors took him like a tide takes a swimmer, steady pull, familiar current. Marble cooled the soles of his shoes. The ceiling threw back his footsteps with that echo of purpose the old builders meant to carve into stone. At the magnetometer, he allowed himself one glance through the glass. The lot was still a circle. In its center, where a man had been made to kneel, there was nothing at all. Sunlight, grit, and a flagpole shadow slicing diagonally like a minute hand. He imagined the tape pulled up, chalk drawings that would someday cover that spot, the plaque he didn't yet know the words for. He imagined the city deciding, all at once and then again, to be better. He stepped through the archway, it beeped. Kinley wanded him and said nothing. Reed touched the gauze one more time, lightly, the way you touch a new scar to check if it's yours, and headed for the hallway where, in less than an hour, the emergency session would roll into war room reforms. The chant leaked faint through the doors. Stand, witness, speak truth, share hope. On the far end of the corridor, a janitor lifted a mop and paused. Your Honor, the man said, shifting his weight, unsure if he should do more. Keep the floors clean, Reed said, grateful for the mercy of simple tasks that keep a world upright. We're going to be busy. And with that, he squared his shoulders toward the cold room with the long table and the hot lights, toward the union rep already spoiling for a fight and the mayor already sharpening the city's spine, toward the map of red dots waiting to be turned into policy and the stack of complaints wanting someone to read them out loud. He went not like a man walking to a podium, not like a man walking to a gallows, but like a judge walking into the only courtroom that mattered at that hour, the one the city had drawn on raw pavement with its eyes and its cameras and its insistence that the law mean what it says even when it hurts to make it true. The conference room was cold enough to make the pitchers sweat. Reed felt the chill climb his sleeves as he stepped inside, the hum of a ceiling vent filling the silence the way old buildings hide their own breath. The long table had been staged with name placards and bottled water, city seal centered like a bullseye. A glass wall looked out over the corridor. Through it, Reed could see a thin river of onlookers and cameras drifting past, the tide of a day that hadn't let up. Mayor Olivia Grant sat at the head with her hands flat on a folder as if she were keeping it from flying away. Chief Mercer took the chair to her right, already rolling his shoulders as if loosening a grip no one could see. District Attorney Lauren Park had a short stack of yellow pads, a pen tucked behind her ear like a carpenter's pencil. At the far end, Rick Donnelly, union president, Ty too proud for the moment, occupied space as if occupying were a job. 3 members of the new Civilian Oversight Board perched halfway down the table, a retired school principal with eyes like hammers, a nurse with a soft voice and steel posture, and a young tech worker whose hands couldn't seem to find stillness. Judge, the mayor said, welcoming and formal all at once. Mayor, Reed said, and took the open chair on the side rather than the head. Control looked different from that angle. It was good for the camera to see that, but more important, it was good for the room. He could feel Tessa in the corner with her rig, lens hooded, red light winking, live stream rolling. Jamal stood just off frame with a laptop, the heat map from the lot clipped to a new dashboard labeled with something that made Reed's shoulders unclench. Receipts. We're streaming, Tessa murmured. Times 600 milliamps. Good, Reed said. Sunlight keeps records honest. Donnelly slapped a palm against his folder. We don't do discipline on camera. You want spectacle? Take it to the street. We did, Reed said. Now we're doing duty. Rick, the mayor cut in, voice cool enough to frost glass, you'll have your say. But we are not going to pretend this didn't happen in public. Half the city watched a sitting judge shoved onto a squad car, The other half already texted the first half for the clip. We do this here, now, and we do it clean. Park flipped a pad open. Charges are drafted. Preservation orders are in motion. IA has been notified to lock down all relevant media. We need to talk implementation, not stall tactics. IA? Donnelly laughed without humor. Those guys work out of my members' locker room. They're not going to like being told to treat their own like suspects. That's why the files will mirror to a civilian server, Jamal said, fingers moving, not looking up. Tamper alerts ping both sides. Nobody has to trust anybody. The system will tattle. The retired principal lifted her chin. Call me Ms. Porter, she said, voice mild but unmissable. And if the system tattles, the board will answer, in public. Donnelly shot Reed a look like a thrown bottle. You stacked this deck. No, Reed said. You stacked yours for years. We're leveling the table. A staffer nudged the door closed, the latch catching with a tiny punch. Reed watched the mayor reach for that folder again, fingers splayed like a brace. Behind the glass, the corridor eddied with faces. He could see Helen guiding someone down the hall with the authority of a ship's pilot through shoals. God bless the woman. In a city like this, they should have put her on the seal. Proposals, the mayor said. Reed didn't look at the pad in front of him. The lines were already written behind his eyes. Body cameras that cannot be shut off without an automatic tamper ping to internal affairs and the civilian board. Binding authority for that board. Subpoena power, public rulings, published discipline, randomized integrity testing. Auditors can pull footage and report straight to the board. Mandatory reporting, see abuse, report it, or share the penalty. 70 hours of training for every sworn officer, 40 implicit bias, 20 de-escalation, 10 black-letter law. We sell 1 armored vehicle to fund the first year. He let the cadence be plain, like reading a grocery list. Plain was sharp enough. Mercer tapped a knuckle on the table. We can stomach 50 hours, he tried. 70 will bleed, overtime. Overtime bleeds slower than a man on the asphalt, Park said, not looking at him. Donnelly gaped. That's your pitch to the rank and file? Take a class or else. My pitch, Reed said, is this. We only let people carry the power to detain and kill if they can prove they won't use it like a hammer on everything that moves. The classes are the dock. The oath is the boat. The rest of us are the water, and we're done letting your officers row wherever they feel like going. Witch hunt, Donnelly said, bored with inventing newer words. Reed glanced at Jamal. Jamal tapped once, and the big screen woke to a map so red it looked inflamed. Dates, times, clusters, the lot outside blinking like a beacon of pain. Witches didn't leave heat maps, Jamal said. These are your guys. Kincaid and Larkin for sure, a few others riding their wake. We'll name them in our filing once chain of custody is done. If you have a better explanation than pattern of practice discrimination, we'll hear it. The nurse on the board, Ms. Hadley, spoke without asking permission. When the ICU sees this many infections around one device, she said, soft, we stop telling ourselves stories and we scrub. The mayor's lips twitched, something between pride and grief. We scrub, she repeated. She looked to the civilians. Binding authority. Are you prepared to use it? Ms. Porter squared the legal pad in front of her as if aligning it against the city's future. We didn't come for lanyards, she said. Park's pen scratched a note, ink setting like policy becoming real. Donnelly threw up his hands. Do you people hear yourselves? Binding authority? Auditors? Tamper-tattlers? You hamstring my guys, they hesitate the next time some thug makes a move, someone's kid dies, and you all wring your hands about unintended consequences. The tech worker, Jordan, stilled their fidget and met him with a level stare. Hesitation is what you call it when people finally see the human in front of them before they pull a trigger. Mercer shifted as if the chair had grown pebbles. Rick, he said, tone worn thin. "You've spent a decade telling me to wait till the union could get there. We're here. The camera was already rolling before you parked." Donnelly went for scorn and hit something like pleading. "You fold on this, Dan. You'll never get your house back." "Times 700s. "I don't want the old house back," Mercer said, and the room inhaled just a little. "It leaks." The mayor tapped the folder once, twice. "Motion to adopt the Reed reform package, effective immediately. Chief Mercer to begin Phase 1 within 72 hours. DA Park to open case files and seek preservation orders. Civilian Board to set public calendar for hearings. All in favor?" Park's hand went up first. Ms. Porter's followed, then Ms. Hadley's, then Jordan's. Mercer put his hand up like he was lifting a stone. The mayor raised hers last, steady. She looked to Donnelly. "Opposed?" Donnelly laughed like a man coughing on smoke. "Record my objection. Mark it in blood." "It's marked," the mayor said. The glass door cracked open. A staffer slid a phone across the table. "You should see this," she whispered. Grant angled the screen, headline filling the top. "Anonymous sources. Chief Judge Reed under ethics review for old misconduct." A grainy photo of Reed from years back bolted beneath like a mugshot. "Ah," Donnelly said, too pleased, too fast. "Look, context." Tessa didn't break frame. Her voice floated in like a thread. "That's the complaint that was retracted by the person who filed it. I spoke with her 20 minutes ago on the record. She says she was pressured by an officer who's now, surprise, on your board." Video split-screened. A woman in her 50s, eyes tired but fierce. "I lied. I was scared. He never hurt me. A cop told me I'd regret speaking against them if I didn't make something up. I regret this instead." The clip ended. The feed returned to the room. "Call it thin gruel," Tessa said. The mayor set the phone down like a scalpel. "Rick, if there are any other smear attempts queued, get them out of your system before dinner. Every one of them will be answered faster than you can print the flyers." Donnelly's gaze darted to the glass, to the long hallway filling with public. Underneath the bluster, Reed saw what he needed. Fear of a mirror he couldn't control. The nurse leaned forward, voice still gentle. "You keep saying, 'my guys,' Mr. Donnelly. They're the city's. Treat them like they belong to us all, and we might start treating you like you belong to us too." The mayor closed the folder. "Meeting adjourned. Press in 10, town hall at 6. I want the board's calendar posted by end of day." Chairs scraped, bodies shifted, the room broke into clusters. Reed stayed seated a moment longer, feeling the pressure change as air from the corridor snuck through the door's seam. A warmer draft carrying coffee and bodies and nerves. Mercer's shadow fell across the table. "I'll brief the captains," he said. "Dull courage, the workman kind." Reed nodded. They weren't friends. They weren't enemies. They were men who had run out of room for pretending. Donnelly paused in the doorway like the last actor out of a scene. "You will regret this," he said, not to Reed, to the room, to whatever could hear him. "When a good cop needs a second and doesn't have it, you'll think about this day." Reed looked him full in the face. "When a citizen needs a lifetime and doesn't get it, I think about every day that led to this one," he said. "Go tell your members the truth. The wall they leaned on wasn't a wall. It was a door. Today it opened. The press. Conference was a clean cut, no improvisation, no chest beating. The mayor laid out timetables, Park previewed charges without poisoning a jury pool. Mercer spoke in sentences that sounded like they'd taken a lifetime to reach his mouth. Reed said little, which said enough. Tessa's live comments scrolled alongside, hearts, angry faces, a rainbow of tiny squares that felt both trivial and enormous. The feed glitched once and recovered, and the city stayed on the line the way you do when you know you're listening to something that will be on the test later. The test of who you got to be. By twilight, the gym at Washington Middle was already hot with bodies. Folding chairs had multiplied like rabbits. Paper fans flicked the air. The stage was a row of cafeteria tables draped with a cloth that didn't quite reach the floor. A handwritten sign near the door said, "Community Listening," as if naming the thing could guarantee it. Reed took a seat at the end of the row, not in the middle, letting the principal own her house. Mayor Grant sat beside the nurse from the board. Park set her bag at her feet, knuckles on her knees. Mercer kept to the far side, away from a cluster of off-duty officers in polo shirts who had arrived as a block and then spread themselves out. No tribe, just cousins. Jamal and Tessa hovered in the aisle, flanked by volunteers with clipboards and speaker slips. The first voice at the mic was raspy with age. An older black man in a Sunday hat doffed it, as if entering a sanctuary. "Name's Deacon Earl. I drove the number 12 bus 27 years. I watched you boys since you were boys. We've always known." The gym answered with a low hum of assent, traveling through wood and bone. A white teacher, cheeks sunburned from ballfield duty, ID lanyard bouncing, took the mic next. "I teach 8th grade civics. I tell kids the system works when we show up. Teach me how not to look away when it hurts." He swallowed. "I want to do it." "Right. I don't know what right looks like yet." The nurse leaned into her mic. "Right looks like the list you're about to hear tonight becoming the list of what we do before the next time. It also looks like you getting some sleep and coming back next week to do it again." A ripple of laughter eased the room. Then Tanya Carter rose, guiding a small boy with a neat part and a borrowed tie. Miles stood on his toes to reach the mic. "My mom says you stopped a bad man," he said to Reed. "Can I walk to school and not be scared?" Reed felt something old in his ribs unclench. "You can walk to school and be seen," he said, "and when you aren't, we'll make noise until you are." The officers in polos shifted. One of them, younger than his haircut, raised his hand. Jamal brought him a mic and held it like a match near gasoline. "Name's Carter, too. No relation. I'm here because my dad was a cop and I wanted to be like him. I also watched that video and I wanted to crawl out of my own skin." He looked at Mercer. "Chief, if I take this training and report what I see, and my sergeant punishes me for it, who's got me?" "I do," Mercer said, and his voice almost broke on the second word. "And if I don't, this board does. And if they don't, the feds will. That's not a threat. It's a promise that I stopped breaking them." The room went quiet in the way rooms do when the air pressure changes. From the back, Officer Evan Ruiz stepped forward in a plain jacket and spoke without a mic. The gym still heard him. "I took an oath to the law, not to a man. Today I remembered that. I'll testify to what I saw and what I did. I'm asking any good cop in this room to do the same and stop hiding behind the worst ones." Faces tightened. One man looked at the floor, another nodded once, small, promising something to himself. Hands kept going up. A woman told a story about her son being stopped for jogging with headphones, narrating his own movements the way pilots narrate landings. A man from the port cuffed in front of his crew for matching a description. A college student who had never called 911 because she didn't trust what would show up. Park took notes like they were depositions. Tessa filmed until her battery threatened mutiny, then filmed some more on her phone. The board wrote names and dates on index cards that would become case numbers and, after that, hearings. Reed listened with the small, painful attention the work demanded, the kind that doesn't rush to fix because it knows the fix begins with not turning away. Near the end, a woman in a floral dress and church shoes asked the question he'd put off hearing all day. "You're a judge," she said, not accusing, not soft. "If you hadn't had that title, would any of this have happened?" "No," he said. "That's exactly why it has to happen now." The principal called last speaker and closed her binder like closing a hymn. "We'll post the board's calendar tomorrow," she said. "Bring your stories. Bring your patients. Bring your neighbors who don't come to meetings." She looked at Reed as if daring him not to show up. "And you bring that calm voice that makes people tell the truth." "I'll bring exactly that," he said. Outside, the school lot held a soft, temporary peace. Moths orbiting lights, cars idling while herd decisions were made about pie at this hour. The smear headlines still trickled on phones, but each one met its counter. Video interviews, documents, timestamps, the truth stacking like bricks on the right side of the scale. Hatch stand witness. Harbor climbed the city's trending feed. Somewhere a kid taught a grandmother how to upload to the archive. Somewhere else, a captain read policy memos with lips pressed thin and a daughter asleep down the hall, deciding whether to be a door or a wall. Helen appeared at his elbow with a styrofoam cup of coffee that tasted like hope and motor oil. "You gave them something they can carry home," she said. "They gave it to each other," Reed said. "I just set the table." "You also picked the restaurant," she said, and he snorted. A text pinged. "Tessa, union whispers on a hot mic, keep your mouth shut." "I've got the clip, running late edition." Then Jamal. "Protective orders signed, mirroring is live, tamper alerts tested. We're past the point where one guy can hit delete and sleep." Reed answered both with the same word he'd sent his daughter, working. He looked back toward the gym. Through the glass doors, the stage still sat. The cheap cloth drape, the place where speakers had stood and told the most expensive truths there are. He pictured the hearings to come. Fluorescent lights, sworn statements, chair legs squeaking, somebody's life cracked open and examined with the care it should have had in the first place. He pictured Kincaid and Larkin not as monsters, but as men told too many times that the laugh is free. He pictured the verdict landing, how it wouldn't fix everything by itself, and how it would still matter like breath. "Tomorrow," Helen said. "Tomorrow," he echoed, and the word didn't sound like a threat or a prayer. Time 500 mint. It sounded like a schedule. They headed for their cars, steps falling into the kind of tired rhythm that feels like purpose using your body as a hallway. Across the lot, Miles tugged at Tanya's hand and pointed at the moon. "It looks like a badge," he said. "It better look like a promise," Tanya said, kissing the top of his head. Reed unlocked his sedan. The cabin light came on with its small, familiar glow. The city's night air slid in, warm as a breath on the neck. He rested his hands on the wheel and let the silence be a blanket for a handful of seconds. Then he turned the key. On the road home, the radio spilled news he already knew, and calls he'd already taken, and worries he'd already carried. He shut it off and drove quiet, the way you drive when you want the day to settle into the places you built for it. At a red light, he glanced at the courthouse shouldering dark against the sky and saw a small cluster of kids chalking on the steps, parents letting them stay up too late. The chalk dust drifted like smoke, except it didn't sting. He smiled, small, unshowy, just enough to make the cabin feel lighter. By the time he pulled to a stop outside his building, the phone buzzed again. Another headline, another clip, a city staying awake longer than it should because sometimes you have to outlast your own past. He texted Naomi, Park, Mercer, Jamal, Tessa, Helen. One thread, 5 words. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., courtroom 3. Replies stacked fast. We'll be there. Make coffee. Bring copies. Bring patience. Bring your judge face. He laughed once, a low sound that didn't belong to the morning's pain, and went inside, the kind of tired that promises sleep and the kind that refuses it wrestling to a draw. Down the block, an officer in a cruiser watched him cross the sidewalk and didn't reach for his radio. The officer's face was new. His eyes followed politely. He lifted 2 fingers from the wheel in a small salute. Reed nodded back, halfway between reflex and grace. It wasn't change, not really. It was a minute. But minutes add up. He let his door swing shut and the locks click into their grooves. He didn't switch on the TV. He didn't scroll. He washed the day off his wrists, unwrapped the gauze, and looked at the red bands the cuffs had left. They'd fade. The plaque outside wouldn't. He turned out the light and lay on his back, listening to the old building talk in pipes and settling wood. Somewhere a siren sighed across town and then softened. Somewhere else a printer ran off the first copies of a board calendar the city had never seen before. He closed his eyes. In the morning, courtroom 3 would smell like copy toner and floor wax and the slightest trace of bleach. He'd sit not on the bench but in the gallery, a citizen with a long memory and a short list of acceptable outcomes. The law would do what it always does, stretch or shrink to the size of the hands holding it. He planned to make sure the hands were many. Sleep came not as a wave, but as a decision. He took it. The city kept watch without him for a few hours, and for once, that felt like progress. Morning came dressed in copy toner and floor wax. Courtroom 3 looked the way it always looked. Flags in their places, seal on the wall judging the judges, pew benches polished by 1,000 tired backs. But the air was different. It had that charged, almost metallic tang you get before a storm. People filed in with the hush of a church service that had invited the whole neighborhood. Reed sat in the gallery, not on the bench. His suit was pressed, his wrists still ringed faintly where the cuffs had kissed red. He kept his hands folded and his breathing slow. Helen slipped into the row behind him and squeezed his shoulder. He didn't have to turn to know it was her. On the far side of the aisle, Tanya and Miles found a seat near the back. Miles in a tiny suit, tie slightly off to one side, eyes huge in a face that hadn't learned to fake boredom yet. He swung his feet and tried to sit still like a man. At counsel table, District Attorney Lauren Park laid out her tools with the neat order of someone who never trusted a drawer to keep her honest. Yellow pads, tabs in a rainbow of consequences, exhibits in folders whose corners lined up like soldiers. Beside her, Jamal Ortiz, second chair for the people, technically a civilian coalition lawyer, but deputized for motive and muscle, checked chain of custody sheets and nodded to himself. The screen at the side of the room sat dark, waiting for the light to tell the truth. The defense table started empty. Then Bryce Kincaid walked in with a lawyer nobody in the room could respect out loud, and plenty did under their breath. Slick suit, slick hair, a binder fat with objections that sounded like excuses when you read them in the right light. Kincaid had shaved. He hadn't slept. He took the chair like it might buck. The judge in this room wasn't Naomi, and sure as hell wasn't Reed. Times 600 malams. Judge Alan Corbett had the steady patience of a man who gardened and secretly thought about retiring whenever a verdict ran long. He liked rules, hated grandstanding, and had a face that didn't forgive liars even when the law did. He took the bench, looked out at the ocean of eyes, and lifted his gavel like a man lifting a spoon. Court is in session, he said, and the wood on wood sounded like a door closing. Jury selection had taken 2 days and a gallon of grace. 12 now sat in the box: a school bus driver, a librarian, a machinist, 2 nurses, a barista who read case law for fun, a retired Marine, a grandmother with a stare that could weld, a 22-year-old who believed in systems the way some people believe in miracles, and 4 others who looked like the city in better lighting. They watched the room watch them, and then they watched the judge. Park stood, no theatrics. She fixed the jury with that precise, surgical eye. "Good morning," she said. "You're going to hear a lot of words. I'm going to give you simple ones: assault, battery, false imprisonment, deprivation of rights under color of law, and one more word that isn't on the indictment but might as well be printed across it: pattern." She didn't wave a heat map at them. She didn't need to. Jamal would get to that when it became evidence instead of argument. She just laid down the road the jury would be asked to walk. "This case is not about how hard the job is," she said, "or whether good people sometimes make bad calls. It's about a man who used a badge like a hammer and laughed about the nails." Defense rose with the careful confidence of a man paid to be offended. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to be told this is simple, he said. It isn't. My client made a split-second decision in a tense environment. He believed he was protecting this courthouse from a threat. The state wants to rewind video and freeze frames, to judge a man in slow motion for a decision he had to make in real time. Don't let them. He looked at Park's file stack like it was an indictment of his own life choices. We'll show you context. Judge Corbett's eyes flicked at the clock. He wasn't interested in sermons. Ms. Park, he said, call your first witness. Park started with a voice the room trusted without asking why. Helen Whitaker. She took the stand like a woman walking to her own kitchen and swore the oath like a promise she'd kept 1,000 times already. How long have you worked at Brooklyn County Courthouse? 25 years, Helen said. Do you know Chief Judge Gabriel Reed? I do. She smiled, then caught herself. Professionally, of course. I know his schedule better than I know my own kids' soccer calendars. On the morning in question, did you see Chief Judge Reed? I did, Helen said, throat tightening. I saw him on his knees on the asphalt with his hands out, and I saw Sergeant Kincaid laughing. Defense stood. Objection. Speculation as to laughter's meaning. Sustained as to meaning, Corbett said, almost gentle. Jury will disregard any implication about meaning. The witness may testify to what she observed. Helen didn't flinch. I observed Sergeant Kincaid laugh, she said. I observed Officer Larkin say, we'll add resisting. I observed Officer Ruiz step back. I observed blood on Chief Judge Reed's pants. Park slid a page onto the evidence table. Ms. Whitaker, I'm showing you People's Exhibit 3, a log of Chief Judge Reed's building entries. Is this a record kept in the ordinary course of business? Yes, Helen said, and when she handed it back, her hand didn't shake. Park could have built the whole case on competence, but she added weight where the floor still felt thin. Tessa. Nguyen came next, foundation expert without needing to call herself that. Chain of custody, she explained, wasn't a spell or a trick. It was just the map of how truth moved from one set of hands to another without losing pieces. Ms. Nguyen, Park said, did you receive dashcam audio files stamped with the dates corresponding to the defendant's patrol shifts? I did, Tessa said. They came from a cloud ping system the city uses to validate uploads. The dash cam in question failed to upload video 9 times, but the audio handshake still hit the server. And did you alter those files? No, she said. I preserved them, copied them, and mirrored them to an independent server at the coalition's request, and under a preservation order signed yesterday. Defense leaned into his mic. Ms. Nguyen, you're a journalist? Ever published a story that turned out to be wrong? Tessa looked at him as if deciding whether to say what she was thinking. Yes, she said finally, and I corrected it, in print, online, and to my mother. So you make mistakes. So do cops, she said, but mine don't involve handcuffs. A ripple made it to the back row. Corbett didn't admonish. Sometimes he didn't have to. Park clicked the screen to life. The audio was better in this room, less wind, more winter. Kincaid's voice filled the space the way a bad dream fills a night. Another black boy playing dress-up. The jurors' faces didn't change, but the air did. Context, Ms. Park? Defense said, desperate to force the word. Glad you asked, she said, and played the second clip. Larkin's laugh, the ad-resisting line, the rookie's uncertain Sarge? She let the silence afterward sit a full 3 beats before she called the next witness. Officer Evan Ruiz walked to the stand like he was walking into a room at home he'd painted himself. He sat, raised his hand, and swore the oath in a voice that didn't crack. Officer Ruiz, Park said, how long have you been with the department? 14 months at the time, he said. Tell the jury what you saw. He did, plain, unvarnished. Kincaid's command voice, the shove, the cuffs too tight, the knee to the back. He told them how his stomach went cold when he heard "boy," how his training said you go firm when you feel fear, but his bone marrow said we're making a mistake. He told them what he'd done and what he hadn't done. He said, I failed my oath. Not because he liked the shape of the words, but because they were the only ones he had that fit. Defense came in hot. Officer, you ever been written up? Yes. For what? For being late twice. Once because I stayed after shift to take a statement nobody wanted. And you expect this jury to believe you over a sergeant with years on the job? Ruiz looked right at the jurors. I expect them to believe the tape over anybody, he said, including me. Corbett's eyebrows went up a millimeter. Park sat back as if someone had just handed her a key. The blue wall didn't fall with drama. It cracked. It cracked when Chief Mercer took the stand in a suit that fit like a compromise and admitted he'd seen patterns he hadn't punished. It cracked when he said, informal discouragement of complaints has been standard practice, and didn't dress the sentence in euphemism. It cracked when he met Reed's eyes, just for a heartbeat, and didn't look away ashamed or defiant, just tired. You could feel cops in the room shift, a tide pulling off the shore as it made up its mind to be different. Park didn't push him to cry or repent. She just layered his line over the map Jamal introduced. Those glowing red dots like a rash around the courthouse, time-stamped and corroborated by logs and witness statements. Jamal's voice stayed low and even, the way a mechanic talks you through a fix so you don't think magic did the work. Then came Kincaid. He put a hand on the Bible with a look that said he didn't like how it suddenly weighed something. He took the oath like an inconvenience and settled in like he owned the chair. Sergeant, Park said, what specifically made you suspect the complainant had committed a crime? He looked wrong for the area, Kincaid said, repeating the phrase as if saying it in a suit made it legal. Define wrong. Clothes, demeanor, the way he wouldn't answer questions. Like the way he answered, I work here, to, what are you doing here? Park asked. He shifted. People lie. Did you run his ID? We were going to. You cuffed him first. For safety. He had his hands visible. You don't know what a man's planning. Apparently he was planning to go to work, Park said. She paused. When you said, another black boy playing dress-up, who were you talking about? Kincaid's jaw flexed. Out of context. So, give me context, she said, and God help him, he tried. He talked about threats and courthouse shootings in other cities and the need to err on the side of caution. He talked about uniforms being targets and civilians not understanding that the job has a smell and a taste and it's never good. He didn't talk about laughter. He didn't talk about delight. Park stepped away from the lectern, away from the script, and stood where she could see him and the jury at the same time. You called a 55-year-old judge boy in front of a class of fourth graders, she said, quiet. That's not caution, that's contempt. Objection, defense said, quick. Sustained as to characterization, Corbett said, but he didn't look at Park like she'd harmed the furniture. He looked at Kincaid like the man had named himself out loud. Defense swung hard on cross. He asked about adrenaline, about tunnel vision, about the way brain chemistry can drown judgment when your heart slams into your throat. He asked whether Ruiz was disgruntled, whether Helen had a vendetta, whether Tessa had a book deal. He asked whether Mercer was trying to save his own skin. He asked whether Jamal's coalition had ever protested outside a precinct. He built a kite out of doubts and tried to fly it with the strings inside the jury's heads. Park didn't chase it. When her turn came again, she put the kite away with one string. Sergeant, she said, edit nothing and answer this. What crime did you suspect? Kincaid's mouth opened. Nothing came out that the law recognized. Park sat. No further questions. The judge instructed the jury about presumption and burden and the mountain the state had to climb. While he talked, Reed's eyes wandered the room as if it were a landscape he hadn't noticed before. He saw the court reporter's wrists, small, tendon smooth, moving in bursts like a violinist's. He saw the sketch artist catching the moment Ruiz had said, "Believe the tape, not me." He saw Miles leaning into Tanya's shoulder, whispering something that made her eyes shine and her mouth set in a line that meant both pride and protection. Closing arguments came with no fireworks. Park held the words like you hold air you plan to share. No flashy metaphors, no pounding fists. You watched a man use a badge like a permission slip to humiliate another human being, she said. You watched him lie about why. You heard the tape. You saw the pattern. Clustered, repeated, explained away until the day a camera and a city said, enough. You are not being asked to fix everything that came before. You're being asked to say the word "we say" when someone breaks the law in front of a lot of people and the law matters anyway. Guilty. The jury deliberated. Hours passed. When the bailiff said, "We have a verdict," the room stood before it realized it had. The 12 came back in, faces careful, hands empty. On count 1, assault. How do you find? Guilty, the foreperson said, voice neither triumphant nor soft. Just true. Count 2, battery. Guilty. Count 3, false imprisonment. Guilty. Count 4, deprivation of rights under color of law. Guilty. Something in the room let go. It didn't swell or shout. It exhaled, quiet, grateful, tired. Kincaid closed his eyes. His lawyer put one hand on his arm and didn't squeeze because he knew better. Park didn't smile. She wrote the verdict down, as if writing it made it real in a way sound alone could not. Tanya's hand found Miles's small shoulder. The boy looked up at Reed and mouthed, "Did we win?" Reed gave him the smallest nod a man can give and still be seen across a room. "We started winning when they stopped looking away," he wanted to say. The work wasn't over. It never is. But the door had begun to swing. 6 months slid by the way a tide pulls at pilings, inch by patient inch, noisy if you stand close, quiet if you stand far. Courtroom 3 settled back into its ordinary rituals. Arraignments before coffee, plea calendars murmuring like beehives, jury panels rubber banding between boredom and civic pride. Yet the room held a new muscle memory. People sat straighter. The seal on the wall didn't look heavier, just more awake. The reforms, once a list on a pad, had become fixtures with scuffs and scratches. Body cams blinking like tiny stubborn stars. Tamper alerts chiming to dual inboxes that never agreed on anything before. A civilian oversight docket pinned to a corkboard in the lobby where the public could rip off copies of the calendar like takeout menus. The board's monthly dashboard, plain language stats, not agency alphabet soup, lived behind the glass next to the elevator. Stops, uses of force, discipline issued, appeals pending. People read it. People argued with it. People pointed at it in the elevator and said, "There, that's what we're watching now." Chief Mercer stood at a podium more than he liked, carrying a new kind of weight, the kind you feel when your name is both a shield and a receipt. He gave updates in nouns, not adjectives, training hours completed, audits conducted, reports filed. He flinched at fewer questions than he used to. He retired the phrase ongoing review like a bad joke. Asked if he missed the old days, he said no, and meant it. The mandatory report rule turned into a habit. Month 1, 2 low-level reprimands. Month 2, a supervisor who liked to turn off his body cam whenever he got philosophical. The alert caught him twice. The board caught him the third time. Time 500 mms. The fourth time never happened because he no longer worked there. Word traveled the way good rumors should. If you see it, say it. If you say it, it sticks. If it sticks, it counts. At Harbor City Law, Officer Evan Ruiz taught seeing humanity first, like a man paying off a debt with interest. De-escalation isn't a trick, he told recruits. It's the baseline. Policy is a floor, not a ceiling. Drills followed. Name what you see without adding fear to it. Black hoodie is not a crime. Nervous hands are not a felony. Jamal followed with black letter law, engraving the spine. Eye rolls at first. Then, there weren't. The room learned. Out front of the courthouse, the steps were different. On Fridays, a violinist took the fourth riser and made the stone hum Bach. Kids chalked scales of justice and lopsided hearts, and once a very credible drawing of a body cam with little stars around it. On a mild Saturday, a city crew installed a plaque where Reed's knees had bled. The brass wasn't fancy. The words weren't either. On this spot, injustice was exposed. May witnesses always stand and truth always travel. Nobody cut a ribbon. People just read it and touched it. Inside, Helen ran the ombud's desk like she'd been born to it. Lines formed the way they form at bakeries. Quiet, orderly, urgent. People brought small humiliations and big ones. Is this normal? I don't think this is supposed to be normal. She listened. She stamped. She walked folks to the board's office, close enough to lend courage, far enough to let dignity walk on its own legs. Tessa filed stories that didn't tilt at outrage for clicks. She wrote about boring miracles, policy meetings where someone changed a mind, a rookie who turned in a supervisor and didn't lose his beat, a city coder patching a surveillance system on a Saturday because she wanted to. Her running column, Unseen Black Stories, carried joy as well as proof. A black public defender's elegant bail argument, a librarian's Know Your Rights shelf that kept needing refills, a crossing guard's whistle, authority wrapped in love. Mayor Olivia Grant learned to say Black Lives Matter from the lectern and mean it like a mayor should. Budget lines, timetables, people in chairs doing the job. Asked if Harbor City had solved racism, she said, "This isn't a model, it's a start, stubborn and local. Keep your cameras on your own town." At home, Reed replaced the gauze on his wrists with a watch his daughter gave him. Simple, leather band, face clear for old eyes. The cuff marks had faded to faint rings, the way a tree keeps a drought year as a narrow record. He didn't cover them. He didn't showcase them. They were there the way years are. One bright morning, Officer Nate Ellis waited at the steps. "Your Honor," he said, flushing, "I joined because of, your case. I want to be better." "Then be better," Reed said. "Every call, every stop, every choice. Don't try to fix the whole world on your second week. Fix the 5 minutes you're in. And learn names. Knowing names reduces fear." Evenings turned the plaza into a table. Community suppers under cheap lights, Jamal with forms in 3 languages and a pan of mac and cheese, Tanya's book swap turned story hour. Miles reading clear, Ruiz, no longer in uniform, serving barbecue and deflecting thanks. "I'm still paying off a loan. I took out the debt myself. Time 1,000, Ms." Of course there were stumbles. Tamper alerts accidentally pinged. A union thread grumbled like a chain letter from the past. The board site crashed because people actually used it. Some officers resigned noisily. More resigned quietly, like men setting down hammers they finally saw could break what they held. But mornings brought small, measurable mercies. A stop that didn't happen because a face was recognized. A patrol car window rolled down to ask, "You okay?" instead of, "What are you doing here?" A complaint answered in days, not months. A jury pool that didn't groan at the oath. Moments when Black Lives Matter sounded less like a chant and more like a city's priorities. Reed got used to the plaque the way you get used to a scar. Startled by it some mornings, grateful other days, always aware of it in his periphery. School groups circled it, Docents rewrote their scripts. A young cop read it on lunch, fingers passing over the words like Braille, eyes good, memory better. When summer tilted toward fall, a breeze made the flags crack like fresh pages. The board posted public hearing, duty to intervene. 3 cases, a full room. Claps at odd moments. Clear rulings, short sentences lawyers admire because appeals have nothing to chew on. Tessa wrote, "Accountability isn't a vibe, it's a verb." She linked an archive labeled Unseen Black Stories. Video clips, oral histories, transcripts, rulings, a library of elders telling kids how the city used to be and how they're glad the city is trying to be now. It trended for an afternoon, then did the quiet work it was made to do. Reporters parachuted in for the anniversary. The mayor routed them to the ombud's desk before the podium. One asked if politics would backlash. Reed said, "I worry about funerals. Backlash makes noise. Funerals make silence. We're choosing the noise." The board issued its first outright termination recommendation in a case once shrugged off as attitude. It stuck. The union yelled, the city shrugged and carried on. The officer who took that spot answered a DV call with Ruiz's de-escalation script and his mother's voice. No headlines, no hashtags, just a kid who did homework at his own kitchen table that night. Some evenings, Reed walked the city at an hour his doctor wouldn't endorse. He liked how Harbor City sounded when the day let go, murmuring porches, chattering crosswalks, the harbor whispering to itself. A high school debate team caught him on the steps. A girl argued that transparency is a force multiplier. He clapped. He meant it. Officer Ellis returned with a new partner, Jordan. "We watched the video again," they said. "We don't want to be that. We want to be better." Reed nodded toward the plaque. "Keep your cameras on, keep your mouths open when you need to, and remember why that's there." Dusk polished the harbor to steel. Tessa framed Reed from the top step. He smiled without knowing. Later she'd run it under. Justice doesn't always look like a gavel. Sometimes it looks like a man breathing easier in front of a building that finally learned how to. His phone buzzed. A selfie from Ruiz. Casebook in hand, officers in back row, caption, "Full house, no eye rolls." Another from Mercer. "Retirement next month. Recommend Ellis for community liaison. He's ready." Reed typed it. "Do it." He passed the plaque. A boy crouched beside it, drawing a set of scales so even it made Reed's eyes sting. "Does it look right?" the boy asked. "It looks fair," Reed said. Nearby, a small group held signs for a maintenance day. "Black Lives Matter." Lettering steady, not shouting. "End racism. Fix policy, not blame." "Racism is a system," a woman told a teen. "Systemic racism breaks when we do boring work with boring fidelity. Want a slot?" He did. Reed breathed. The air didn't taste like verdicts. It tasted like possibility, salted with skepticism, the only seasoning that keeps movements from rotting. He thought of his mother's thermos, his daughter's closing statements, the headlines that come and go, and the local names that stay. Across the plaza, the violinist began anew. It rose thin at first, then filled the space between stone and sky. 2 officers slowed. A teen put his phone down. A man in a suit closed his eyes for a measure and let the notes rinse the day off him. Reed slipped his phone away and stood still until the last note hung and fell. Then he stepped off the curb the way a person does when the light turns and the road is clear. Alert, ordinary, unafraid. Behind him, kids got chalk on their knees. Ahead of him, a future toddled on unsteady legs. In the middle, a city remembered, again and again, what witnesses are for, what cameras are for, what neighbors are for, and what justice looks like when it refuses to be only a plaque or a promise. It looks like people. It looks like policy in ink and practice in muscle. It looks like unseen black stories becoming just American stories, told without apology and lived without permission. The tide tested the pilings and, finding them a little stronger than last year, sighed and moved on. The plaque caught the last of the light and tossed it back, the way a good memory does. Unblinding, unblinking, enough to see by. Harbor City kept breathing. Reed did too. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive in a courtroom. It begins in a parking lot when someone refuses to stay silent. What happened that day didn't just expose racism. It revealed the courage it takes to face it and still believe in change. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it, speak about it, leave your thoughts below. Because every voice that refuses to look away keeps the light on a little longer. Thank you for watching and for standing witness.